Matt Whitaker, former U.S. Acting Attorney General.
This is such a great conversation about America, our future, what's going to save our republic.
We have a great football player. Matt Whitaker is here. Matt.
They tried to bury me. They didn't realize I was a seed.
It's a touchdown, Whitaker.
Former acting U.S. Attorney General.
Under President Trump.
I'm going to be an unwavering supporter of law enforcement.
Welcome to Liberty and Justice with your host, Matt Whitaker.
Today's episode is sponsored by Save Missouri Values PAC. Welcome to Liberty and Justice. I'm your host, Matt Whitaker. You can catch us every Friday, 7 p.m. at CPAC Now and anywhere that podcasts are distributed. But Whitaker.tv is the best place to see what we're doing. I'm joined, as you can see, by my good friend, Chad Wolf. Chad, glad you'd be with us.
Well, Matt, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been trying to get you on this show for a while, especially with the news of the day. It seems like not a single day goes by where the brave men and women of Border Patrol, ICE, and other DHS units and entities are in the front page doing important law enforcement things. But let's get right into it. You were the acting secretary of Homeland Security, the Department of Homeland Security, and one of your main charges was to protect the American people by implementing an effective border security. Why don't you talk to me? I know what we did because I was there and you and I worked together. But why don't you tell those folks that maybe aren't as familiar with kind of some of the policies that you were able to implement and how effective they were during the Trump administration?
Well, absolutely. And I would say, as we came into the administration in 2017, I think there was a recognition that the situation along the border, even at that time, was a little bit out of hand, was a little bit uncontrollable, where you had mass illegal immigration occurring along that border without a lot of consequences, and with the cartels and others just again pushing and smuggling and trafficking individuals across that border. And it's really the way it had been during the Obama administration, and I would also say to a large extent during the Bush administration. And so you really had a transformative president with President Trump who came in there who said, I want to fix this. I want to roll up my sleeves and I want to try to do the hard work to try to get this under control, to put some solutions in place, some long-term solutions that would work and that would help. And so that's really what our charge was over that 4 years. And we had some hiccups and some bumps early in that road. 2017, 2018, we tried to work with Congress to enact laws that would allow DHS and its law enforcement officers to do their job better, quicker, and more efficiently. And we just never got that from Congress. And so we went about kind of constructing our own path forward. And that included building border wall systems, over 450 miles of that by the end of the administration. But it also included programs like the Remain in Mexico program, asylum cooperative agreements, and the like. And the idea with all of these agreements and all of these different programs and policies is to make sure that, one, we rooted the fraud out of the immigration system, and there's an immense amount of fraud that these cartels and NGOs and others use our laws to circumvent, to find those loopholes, to allow individuals to stay here in the United States that have no legal right to stay here in the United States. So we went about changing and trying to fix some of those, but we also tried to bring some of that deterrence back into the system, right? Crossing the border illegally between a port of entry is against the law. But if there's no consequence to that, if no one's going to hold you accountable for breaking that law, then there's no use in it. There's no purpose in it. So we wanted to bring some deterrence back, make sure that individuals are held accountable for their actions and then removed quickly. And so those were just a few of the items. And then over the course of 2019 and 2020, we really started seeing a lot of the work that we had put in over the last 3 or 4 years start to come to fruition and really realize that. And then you started seeing those apprehension numbers start to drive down really, really low. And then COVID came in, and that presented a unique set of circumstances. But look, at the end of the day and the end of the administration, we had a pretty good playbook. We had a playbook of what worked and what didn't work. And we handed that playbook off to the administration, to the Biden administration, the incoming folks. And we said, look, we don't know what you're going to do, but if you do half the things that you campaigned on, you're going to have a real problem. And here's why. And we kind of walked it out for them. The lack of beds, the lack of facilities, the lack of transportation, everything that we've seen over the past 15 months, we outlined for them. And they took that playbook, and for all intents and purposes, they kind of put it in the trash can. And they went about, kind of dealing with border security in a very odd way, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit. And so that's kind of, how I see the last 5 or 6 years shaping up. It was a lot of hard work to do a lot of transformative measures during the Trump administration. I think measures that most Americans would say work. We kept the border somewhat under control, and we're not sure why we're not using some of those same measures today.
Yeah, and you and I worked on so many important things, and you mentioned one that I think was actually a creative idea, but at the same time grounded in law, and that was the idea of if you didn't come into a port of entry, if you came in between ports of entry, essentially illegally crossed our southern border, that should have had some consequences. Not only was it illegal, but I think we looked at maybe not being eligible for asylum then, because, and those types of things. And as you know, probably better than most, is the Department of Justice runs the immigration courts. They're completely overwhelmed and swamped now, although we surged. I think we put over 100 new judges into that system. And the Attorney General sits as essentially the Supreme Court of the immigration courts. And so you could take a case on further review after the immigration appeals judge panel had reviewed it and set precedent, set law based on kind of how those judges had previously misinterpreted. And we did that, and we really had a good rhythm going, especially when I took over as acting Attorney General. But there's I think such a need for a comprehensive, and I use that like a government-wide solution, because DHS and DOJ have such an interplay in this space. But we were working with one hand tied behind our back because Congress was an unwilling partner. I remember you went up so many times to testify on just common sense changes in the laws and your authorities that would have made your jobs so much easier and would have made a system at least a little more rational, because it is it's very difficult when you're when you're dealing on the ground. And I remember sort of our conversations where you'd be like, how do you expect me to train our border protection folks on this checklist of how to go through these various cases depending on what country they're from and what they're claiming and all these types of things. I mean, obviously we've seen the video from the border. It's very rugged, difficult, and he's usually in the middle of the night, and it's hard for them to do the work, and then we expect them to execute these draconian and nonsensical checklists. It's almost like we're trying to make it hard for the officers to do their job.
I think that's right. Now, a great program that both DHS and DOJ were partners in was that Remain in Mexico program that we put in place towards the end of the administration in 2019, and it's a program that worked. And it's this whole idea of if you're seeking asylum, and we know, a small percentage actually qualify for asylum because it's hard to get, and it should be hard to get, just like refugee status is hard to get. We know about 12 to 13% actually qualify, and so the whole idea was try to root out that fraud, to say, the other 80 some odd percent don't try to gum up the works and gum up the system, and not allow the United States government to be able to reach that 13% that truly need it. So this whole idea that, yes, you can still claim asylum in the United States or at that southern border, it's just during the course of your immigration proceedings, you're going to remain in Mexico. Yeah. There's no, what we saw and what we argued in front of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the Remain in Mexico program is totally fine and legitimate and comports with law, was to say, yes, you have a right to claim asylum, and you have a right for your asylum proceeding to be heard by a U.S. immigration judge, but you don't have a right to remain in the United States during that process. And so that's all Remain in Mexico was, is we were trying to root out that fraud and get their immigration court proceedings done quicker, in a quicker fashion. And what we saw is it worked. That people that knew that they were submitting a fraudulent claim decided not to partake in the program, decided not to make that journey. And that's what we need at the end of the day. And so you have this administration right now who has the same numbers that I just told you, knows that 85 to 86% of asylum claims are fraudulent, and yet they're releasing these individuals into the country for 3 to 5 years before they see an immigration
And do they
judge.
have some right to work after a certain period of time? Is that
They do. They do. About 6 months after once you claim asylum and you go through the proceedings and you actually show up for some of your court-appointed check-ins with ICE in the immigration system, after about 6 months, you'll get a work permit.
Yeah, I mean, it just is the American people, if they understood how manipulated this system is by people that have no right to claim asylum, are not following U.S. laws, are only doing it as a fraudulent scheme to come to the United States to live and work for as long as they possibly can. I think they'd be more outraged than they are right now because, to your point, this administration has repealed all of these policies. Yeah. Obviously, they've tried to repeal Title 42. They've unsuccessfully, at least to this point, have tried to repeal the Remain in Mexico. Although I don't sense that the Biden administration is giving it really a meaningful enforcement. They can't seem to just work it out like we had it worked out the year before they repealed it. So how bad is it? I know you've been down on the border. I mean, I know you've done tons of tours down there. Like
it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
It's bad as far as the overwhelming numbers, but it's also bad for Border Patrol officers and agents that are overwhelmed. They've been overwhelmed for 15 or so months. They see no end in sight. And the way I describe it is, imagine if you're a Border Patrol officer and you have a belt of tools. Metaphorically, you have a belt of tools that says, okay, I've got a border wall system. I've got a Remain in Mexico program. I've got cooperative agreements. And I have many, many others. And one by one, those tools are taken out of your tool belt and thrown on the ground and thrown away in many instances. And so you're that Border Patrol agent that's sitting there and saying, okay, I had 7 tools on my tool belt. Now I have only 5. Well, today they only have 1 tool left, and that's Title 42. And they know that their political leadership, and they know the administration does not like it, and they know they're trying to still repeal it. And so if you're a Border Patrol officer, you're saying, okay, I'm about to lose the only tool I have left that keeps any resemblance of control over this border. And I say that very loosely.
Yeah.
And so they're growing frustrated. Morale's at an all-time low. Unfortunately, suicide rates with Border Patrol are at an all-time high, because when you're operating in this type of environment, you have the stress that they have on them every single day, and they take that home day in and day out. It starts to wear on you. They can gut through it for a month or 2 or 3 or 4. That's kind of it's how they operate. But when you're 15 months in, and you're probably looking at another 15 to 16 to 17 months, you're asking yourself, where does this end? And that's what they're seeing there. And that's just Border Patrol agents that live along that border. I think what's important to remember is that, and I get asked this question a lot, people just say, why? Why is the administration doing this? Why did they want an uncontrolled border? Why did they want hundreds of thousands of folks coming across that border illegally every month? It's a hard question to answer, but I answer it this way. It's by design. They campaigned on this, and the DHS secretary will tell you almost any chance he gets. He says they have a plan, and they're executing on their plan. And so you have to take them at face value, and you have to say that their plan has been the past 15 months. And if you're executing on that plan, then you're executing on an open borders agenda that says, I don't care about the sovereignty of the United States. I don't care about American communities. The only thing I care about is processing individuals quicker and faster than we ever have before, so that they're not waiting under bridges in Del Rio, or they're not waiting outside of Border Patrol facilities. Because if I don't have a line, that means I don't have a crisis. That means I don't have a problem to deal with. So if I just process people quicker and quicker and quicker, then there's nothing to see here. And it's exactly the wrong problem. It's exactly the wrong solution to the wrong problem. The more you process them, the more the cartels know that you're processing more and more people, the more and more people they're going to shove towards that border. It's an incentive measure like one we've never seen before. So I don't understand their strategy at all.
Does anybody under this administration get removed ultimately? I mean, is there? I assume the answer is no. That if you're let into the country, you're essentially here at least till the Biden administration's over.
I think that's right for the vast majority of folks. So I think it's instructful to look at the last month of numbers that we have, and so that's for the month of April. month of May. And so they removed, under Title 42, they removed about 96,000 individuals. That's a large number, but they're using Title 42 authority. So just think about the number of folks, that's 96,000 folks, if Title 42 goes away tomorrow, that are being released into the country. And why do I say that? Because if they're not using Title 42, and I don't mean to use a lot of jargon, you're then using Title 8. And so you're moving everyone into Title 8. So let's just look at the number of folks in Title 8 in April alone. They put about 136,000 in Title 8, which they will say, and they use clever wordings like immigration removal proceedings. Well, out of the 136, they only removed 10,000.
Yeah.
So you had about 120,000 individuals released into the country in the month of April under Title 8 using the removal authority that DHS has today. And so you just have to think, if you're going to pull down Title 42, you're going to put another 96,000 folks into there, and this is just in 1 month. You could have upwards of about 200,000 folks or more released into the United States, never to show up at an immigration judge hearing, never to get removed. The only way to really, really remove people is to detain them, have their day in court, and then remove them. We know the numbers and the facts, the data all support that. At the end of the day, the goal here is to enforce the law, and it's to remove individuals that don't have a legal right to remain here in the United States. And if that's your goal, then you've got to do things just dramatically different than what's going on today.
Right. Yeah, and I think the thing that I worry about, in addition to these, these just numbers and how the Biden administration is executing this plan that you mentioned, is how many people are never encountered? How many, quote unquote, getaways? I mean, I'm not sure that we have an actual number, but there's got to be a proportionality where there are, at least an equal amount of people that are coming here that don't interact with Border Patrol at all.
Yeah, it's such a great question, and we call those gotaways, and you're exactly right, they're gotaways. And we estimate, or I should say DHS estimates, again, with the numbers that we're seeing today, you probably have, in the course of a 30-day period, somewhere between 60 and 70,000 of those individuals coming across the border that are never encountered, nevertheless ever apprehended, but even encountered by Border Patrol officers. But how do we know that they're there? Because we have radar feeds, we have camera feeds, and we have some other abilities to detect where those individuals are crossing and how many have crossed. And so these are the individuals that are most concerning to me, because these are the individuals that have the means to pay the coyotes and the cartel members to smuggle them across the border in areas that they know Border Patrol is not in. These are not the family units that are showing up 200-300 at a time and are seeking out Border Patrol because they want to be released into the country. These are folks they have no intention. They don't want to be encountered by law enforcement. They don't want to have their fingerprint taken, their name run, their biometrics enrolled. They don't want to do that for a variety of different reasons, and you can only imagine what those are. They're not good people, and they're here for nefarious reasons. Some could just be criminal in nature, and others could be much worse than that. But when you have 60 to 70,000 a month, and it just starts to add up month after month after month, and you have to say, what is going on? And so you have the secretary testified in front of Congress. Matt, you testified, I've testified. Yep. And he says in front of Congress, the border is closed, the border is secure, and DHS has operational control of the border. Yeah. And I would just submit to you, if you have 70,000 folks that are coming through that border that you never encounter, it's not closed, it's not secure, and there's no earthly way that you have operational control over it.
Right. I think his testimony and the talking points that they have constructed is the biggest gaslighting operation in the history of America. And the fact that the media is unwilling or unable to tell this story is just a shame. What do we do? I mean, ultimately, the American people are going to get sick of this and are going to start, this issue is going to continue to rise in their minds, because every time, if you're having 200,000 people a month come into our country, they're those ultimately a subset of them, maybe it's a small subset, maybe it's a meaningful subset, are going to commit crimes. They're going to hurt people. They're going to, kill American citizens. The outrage ultimately, you saw that one of the people, the guy that was arrested for the George Bush assassination plot was an asylum seeker.
Right.
And so,
right.
You see these people that are here. They shouldn't be in our country in the first place. They're abusing our system of asylum, but they're going to ultimately not all be valedictorians of their high school class. And I think this is the hardest thing as conservatives that stand for the rule of law, that want our border secure, that want to stop this illegal flow, that want to use every tool, to your point, every tool in the tool belt to, have a system of immigration that serves the American interest. I mean, I think that's the biggest, frustration that I have is we should have the best and the brightest from around the world come here and contribute to our economy and our society. But we just can't have this unregulated flow of whoever wants to come here, because 25% of the world wants to come to the United States of America.
It's a great point. And so when we say, look, this set or this group of individuals shouldn't be here, it's not that we're not compassionate.
Right.
The United States, as I like to point out, particularly under President Trump, but even in the last year, gives out more green cards, gives out more ability to come to the United States than any other country in the world does. So we are compassionate people, but there's a legal way and a right way to do this.
Right.
Is if you follow the rules, then you wait your turn in line and you can get in. It's when you have this illegal behavior that happens and continues day after day, month after month, year after year, that you decide to ignore it, which is what the Biden administration is doing. They're just ignoring the fact that 234,000 individuals decided to break the law last month alone, and they're not doing anything about it. Well, that compounds itself over time. And the secretary got asked the question, Matt, you just asked, which is, I forget which member he asked him, but basically said, are any of these individuals that are coming in illegally going to commit crimes? And the secretary said, well, sure, yes, just by the sheer numbers. And so if your answer is yes, then the follow-up is, well, what are you doing about it?
Right.
Or do you just throw up your hands and say, well, that's just the way it is? And I submit to you, every crime that happens that is committed by someone here in the country illegally is a crime that didn't have to take place. It is a preventable crime at the end of the day. And if your job as a law enforcement officer, or in this case, the Secretary of DHS, part of your job is to protect Americans every day. And it just doesn't happen from terrorist events. It happens from what's on that southern border. And so we need to get serious about the cartel situation. They're very complex organizations. To defeat them is going to take some really innovative ideas and solution sets. It's not going to be more of the same that we've been doing for the past couple of decades.
Right.
You're really going to have to get aggressive. But this is what's killing Americans every day, and I don't think we should shy away from that. These are the same groups and organizations that are smuggling individuals, or also smuggling illegal narcotics across that border in record numbers. In the fentanyl and opioids crisis that we have here in the United States are killing over 100,000 Americans every single year, overdose deaths. And so they are killing Americans every day. And so, look, I appreciate we have great debates about Ukraine and what we're doing overseas. To my knowledge, not one American soldier has died in Ukraine. But every single day, Americans are dying because of what is occurring on that southern border. And so I think we have to get real serious about this.
You're so right, Chad. We can't help but look at how the coverage of something like monkeypox is covered versus, like to your point, 100,000 overdose deaths a year, and a lot of the problems coming through our southern border with the same failed policies of the Biden administration. We could talk all day about these subjects. You're so knowledgeable, and I was there along for the ride, working with you and others. But talk to me a little bit in the final minutes we have about your work at America First Policy Institute. What you're focusing your time and attention. I know you're the executive director there as well. But talk about kind of some of the the policies and the solutions that you're working on to help the American people.
Sure. So the America First Policy Institute, it's a great organization. We've got about 21 different policy centers, and it ranges across all the issues from national security to school choice to health care to pro-life and everything in between. And so it's exactly what the name says. So what we're doing is crafting policy solutions to put Americans first. So as we think about these public policy issues, the tough ones that are facing Americans, whether it's the economy and inflation and spending, or whether it's the security, both national security and homeland security, it's what's best for the American people. What's best for that individual or that family living in Iowa or living in Texas or Nebraska or Kansas or and everywhere else. Let's put them first and foremost. What's best for them instead of looking out for special interest and looking out for, it's the way it's always been done, so let's just continue to do it that way. And we really did that. President Trump really brought that sort of to the forefront of a lot of people's minds of how do we put Americans first in what we do every single day. And he certainly did that in the 4 years he was in the White House. We did it at DHS in the 4 years I was there. We just didn't know that we didn't call it America First. We just said, look, we're going to enforce the law and we're going to do things that's right for the American people. And I think once the administration left and then we saw the Biden administration come in and change a lot of policies, not for the betterment, right, for the worse in many, many cases, I think people are sort of longing to say, how do we put America first again? How do we get back into that driver's seat? How do we have the strongest economy in the world? How do we have the secure borders that we need? How do we continue to give parents choice on where their children go to school? How do we make it easier to vote and harder to cheat? How do we do all these different things? Well, it takes a lot of work, and I would say myself and my colleagues at America First Policy Institute, AFPI, we're on the forefront of that in trying to work with both federal legislators, state legislators, their staffs, to educate them on these right approaches and moving forward. So whether it's all the issues I talked about or whether it's ESG, school safety, food security, these are all issues that we're tackling right now because they're really important to the American people. And I think they deserve a thoughtful response and really a different approach that we see today.
Yeah, and Brooke Rollins runs AFPI, and she always says this isn't a think tank, this is a do tank, and I think that's such an important reminder for all of us. And in full disclosure, I co-chair one of the centers at AFPI, the Center for Law and Justice, and get to work with all these great people on these important issues. How can people learn more about it? I'll make sure I include it in the show notes. Yeah, absolutely. AmericaFirstPolicy.com. You can go there. We also have a podcast, very much like you do here, Matt. It's agenda.americafirstpolicy.com. You can go there. You can hear I interview some of these folks, like Brooke and some of the other leaders at AFPI, and then just some other. I need to be on there soon.
Absolutely. But also some other conservative thought leaders and America First movement leaders, kind of picking their brain on what they see and how AFPI and other groups like us can help them. We've got midterms around the corner, and I think there's a new way to approach some of these pressing issues that the country's facing, so we're looking forward to it. All right. Well, Chad Wolf, Executive Director at America First Policy Institute and former Acting Secretary of DHS, has been my guest here on Liberty and Justice. Thank you so much, Chad, for the time. All right. Thank you, Matt.